Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox Podcast, where our mission is to encourage and equip local church worship leaders as you lead well in your church. Today I'm joined in the studio with my friend Tim Price, and we are talking about energy of the worship team. We have 6 ideas for helping you increase the energy of your worship team. We're looking forward to a great episode, and we are so glad that you are here. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well.
Good
Life
deal.
is rolling along, and it's been awesome. Good to be with you.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. Looking forward to another great episode. Hey, I got a question for you, man. So how did you get into leading worship? What's your story about that?
Oh, man, those stories can be long or the nutshell. I'll do the simple thing, but really, without me knowing it, I got invited to lead worship when I was a 6th grader, and I just learned to play guitar. And a lady in our church at the time named Jennifer asked me to come lead music for a kids ministry. And so I think for the first 6 months, I played the same 3 songs over and over. And I did that. Then I learned a few more, obviously, I guess. But I sang with those kids. It was a semi-large church. I guess it was probably 800 people at the time. Kids ministry had, the elementary age group I was with probably had 60, 70 kids in that room. And I did that for my whole 6th grade year.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of launched it, unbeknownst to me, because after that I led for student ministry stuff and college ministry stuff, and then eventually our church and harvest ministry and all of it. So
Wow. That's
kind of
pretty
weird
cool.
to think about.
Yeah, that's a 6th grader. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that was way back in the 80s.
Yeah. Just a few moons ago.
What about you? How'd you get into it?
Well, I guess a little bit in a haphazard way as well. I mean, my first way, I kind of entered into it through the media ministry. You know, I was, I was the media director at the church, and so I was in charge of all of our volunteers and the sound and the lighting and the presentation screens and all of that. And so I was playing an instrument at the time and singing and doing that, but wasn't really leading. And then after that role went away, I just kind of started playing in the church band, and then it just kind of transitioned into kind of, becoming a worship leader, not really full time or all the time, just as needed, so, and I fill in at some churches occasionally that around the area, some rural churches that need help. Occasionally I just fill in, and when they're without a worship leader at the moment, I'll just kind of be an interim, and I enjoy that. So
It's interesting. A lot of it is based on need. Like,
yeah,
the need is present, and then the calling appears in someone's life.
right.
And so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that happens a lot in churches for sure. So, well, let's jump into our quick segments on segment 1. So let's take a moment to do some rapid fire practical questions before we get to our the main body of our content today. So first, you got a good book you're reading now?
Yeah, I think I mentioned last time, I try to read about 40 or 50 books a year just to stay up on things. And one of these days that might fade out a little if I realize that I don't have enough time or whatever. But the book I just am finishing reading right now is by Craig Groeschel, The Power to Change. And it's all about habits and how it can help, change your life, something you're trying to fix or get shifted over or anything like that. And I'll stick it in the show notes there with a link. It's a great read, and it's really good.
Yeah. Anything by Craig Groeschel is pretty awesome. So I love listening to his sermons for sure. So
Yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff.
yeah, he really does. Tell us about the guitar you play, or any guitars you own. I think the listeners might be interested to know what kind of guitars that we play and that we have.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. Well, I know some worship leaders lead guitar, some lead with keyboard, some just lead vocally and arrange things. But I will get my list jotted down here. What about you? Do you know how many guitars you own, or what they are, the ones you do own?
Yeah, I own 4 guitars, I guess, 3 acoustics and 1 electric guitar. My electric is a Fender Telecaster. It's a 1952 replica Telecaster, and I really enjoy playing that. But I guess my main guitar, I have 2 Martin acoustic guitars, and I have a Blue Ridge acoustic guitar. The Blue Ridge is a BR-160A. It's an Adirondack top guitar, just beautiful, warm sound. And I guess my main guitar is my baby, my Martin HD28. I play a lot of bluegrass music in my band, and we play a lot of bluegrass gospel stuff. So it has a real deep, warm sound, and a lot of bluegrassers love those Martin guitars. So that's kind of my go-to.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know all the numbers of mine, but the guitar I play now is a Martin guitar, acoustic electric, and it is, I think, trying to figure it out that it's a GPC of some sort, like the Grand Performance Concert guitar. It's a cutaway and plug. It sounds great plugged in, and it sounds great not plugged in. And so I've been using that since probably 2015. Before that, I had an Alvarez Yari, the DY62, which was a weird series, evidently. I've got a lot of comments on it over the years. It never had a pick guard. It was kind of just a matte finish front. And actually had stereo pickups, had 2 quarter-inch inputs in the bottom so that you could have top 3 and bottom 3 stereo. So it was a weird little guitar. But I played that from 92 until about 2015. It started kind of fading away. And my dad went and bought like a lot of guitars off a musician's friend 10 or 15 years ago and gave us all one for Christmas, like just an old kind of not throwaway, but just a sit around your living room kind of guitar.
Yeah.
So that's some sort of Washburn that sits in the living room, and I don't care who touches it or plays it.
Right.
So just sit around and have it there.
Yeah.
And then I guess I didn't realize, I was just sitting here jotting them down, that my wife one year for Christmas bought me a little Martin backpacker. One of those little tiny, like skinny bodies, and you kind of put in a little backpack and take it camping or something. Yeah, and now that we asked this question, it'd be fun to list all of them, because both of my daughters have guitars and mandolins and basses. And so it's pretty interesting to think about. But one little note is that everything except for the Yari that I bought, I had to take out a loan, and actually cost more than my guitar. Back when I took it out, I was in college, and I didn't have a very good car. I actually had like a little Escort. My guitar was more expensive and valuable than my car itself. But I took out a loan to get it, and I paid it off and loved it all those years. But all the other guitars that I have were gifts.
Wow.
So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I'll tell that story another time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Well, on to our last quick segment 3, and I can't believe I'm even asking you this, but do you have any good jokes for the day? Tell us a good joke.
Any good jokes?
And that's the key phrase, good jokes.
Yeah, I don't have any good jokes, that's for sure. Just the other night, we had rehearsal at church, and we were doing the sound check Sunday morning, and I actually told this joke on Sunday morning during our little rehearsal. And I don't know why it fit in, or I don't know why I said it, but I will often share a joke during rehearsal somewhere when we're waiting for something, or it's not just puns. Sometimes that happens naturally with people, but I'll just say, have you heard this joke? And I'll just tell people, and everybody will laugh. And there's something about it that's kind of like gets everybody. So I don't even know if people get this joke, but here it is, super short. Guy went into the doctor's office and the doctor said, I see your problem. Your DNA is backwards. And the guy said, and?
Gee, oh man, so bad.
Yeah, at least it's short. Nobody has to
That is
suffer through
short,
it.
that's for sure. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, we better move on for sure. So, but today's conversation is all about the energy level of the band and worship team. You may have heard the old analogy that we should be more like thermostats than thermometers. So a thermostat kind of sets the climate, and a thermometer just merely reads it. So this is an essential point for the worship leader and the team members to remember.
Yeah, especially, when we're leading, we have to let our energy impact the congregation. And this intentional effort, which isn't always easy, over time, we'll just build a culture of alive and active worship among the congregation. That's such a huge part of what leading is all about.
Right. Yeah, the audio plays into that energy as well as your stage presence. So, and a bunch of other factors as well. But it's not always easy to set that tone. So.
Yeah, it definitely requires intentional planning and the hard work of, building the culture of being energetic while you lead. But really, it's whether you're leading music or speaking or presenting from the front in any fashion, the presenter or the leader is carrying much of the burden to be energetic enough to help create an energetic atmosphere. And that's kind of what we're heading to today.
That's right. Well, let's get into our topic. So today we have these ideas to intentionally increase your energy on stage. And the first one is the obvious one, prayer.
Yeah, I always feel like we have this in a lot of lists, but it is true that God uses prayer and works through it, and God's presence is near to us as we approach and pray and approach His throne. And so, prayer as a team before the worship service really allows your spirit, each individual person, and the team collectively to sense and be open and ready and receive the Holy Spirit in their lives. It allows us really to set aside ourselves and bring a humble and trusting faith to the leadership which God has called us to in leading the church. And it helps this idea of praying in terms of the energy in the room really helps turn what might other become just a performance to really the true purpose and the heart of our worship and our leading the church. And just that confidence, that kind of shift in our mind through God's power really does shape how the church receives it.
Right, absolutely. My childhood pastor said every sermon growing up, every time is just drilled in us. Prayer changes things, prayer changes people, and prayer changes the people that we pray for. He just,
Huh.
so it just said every sermon he said that. And so as a child, it was just kind
Yeah,
of ingrained in me. So,
that's really true. Yeah, and
yep,
the scripture supports that. I mean,
absolutely.
prayer
Absolutely.
things.
Well, then, number two is the right frame of mind.
Yeah, and this is something that the leader can, each of us as leaders, I guess I should say, needs to keep in mind and also continue to task and encourage your team with this mindset as you're leading. But really, worship leadership is about being excellent. It's about doing music. It's about all the things that we talk about on the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast. But the big overarching thing is that we are creating this opportunity for people to give praise and encounter Christ. And so you're setting the stage and tasked with this mission to model worship. And the way you do that is kind of an indication of how God is at work in you and how God is at work in this congregation. And so that right frame of mind is really you are a reflection and a vessel of what God is doing. And so we don't want to be hyper and crazy. We'll probably talk about that in a minute, but we want to be noticeably enthusiastic about this hope that we have. And so we want to step on the stage with that kind of mindset.
Right, absolutely. Good stuff. Number three in our list today is understand the visual impact.
Yeah. Have you ever been in any musicals or anything like that
I
when you
have
were
not.
younger?
No.
Yeah. I got roped into one. That was the end of my career. I was in Annie Get Your Gun, and it was fine, but it wasn't like it didn't like get me all excited and I latched into it or anything. But in drama and in that experience, I learned that if you are going to have the audience in the play or whatever the musical actually know what you are experiencing emotion wise, you have to make it bigger. So what you think of as a smile for a whole audience needs to be like 50% bigger just so they can see your smile.
Mhm.
Or if your eyebrows are going to raise, they have to raise a little higher. Or if you're going to move your hand, you got to move it a little bigger. Anything so that they actually can see it. And so this visual impact is not something we're trying to manipulate and try to get people to do things, but if we're going to lift our hand or smile or do any kind of facial expression, it's going to have to be slightly bigger if we're on the stage and there's any number of people out there, because otherwise they're not going to notice that. And so the visual impact has to come through the leaders of leading worship.
That's interesting. I never
Yeah.
heard that before. That's pretty cool. Makes sense
Kind of
too.
sometimes makes you feel a little funky, but
Yeah.
but you got to get used to it.
Right.
And I hear all the time people saying, "Yeah, you're always smiling up there," and so it's just part of how it works.
Right. Well, that's good stuff. Well, number four in our list of 6 things today is creating energy as a practice.
Yeah, you got to keep the ball rolling in this whole regard, and you can practice creating energy. And some of that is by watching videos of other people, learning the best ways to help movement and vocally and audio wise, all the different little tools and angles that we have for leading worship. We want to practice making that really great, lighting, all of it. But probably the biggest takeaway for this is that you need to practice some energy making, kind of excitement during your rehearsals. Because if you don't practice during rehearsal and you don't practice sound check, then you come to the time when it's time to lead worship and you're probably not going to do much with it. I mean, because you haven't really, you kind of already practiced just standing there as opposed to a little bit of movement or a little bit of high energy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of rehearsal, even though it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you have like the one lone nut who's kind of up there with you and just kind of bouncing around during rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
But and everybody's like, "Oh, that's kind of neat." But even in rehearsal, that person helps everybody else kind of raise to the excitement of it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good stuff.
Mhm.
Number 5 on our list is energy must not be awkward.
This is where we could have a lot of fun stories, probably. But as we're leading and helping to produce the excitement and energy, we've got to just stay slightly ahead of the congregation. We can't be so high energy that it becomes uncomfortable and awkward. So you just need to be far enough ahead that people are inspired and by the energy and able to model it, as opposed to just going nuts. So I don't know if you've seen this anywhere, but I've been at conferences and places where large gatherings, thousands of people are. And it seems like in those settings, the worship band will just jump up and down and do all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it fits because the whole place is kind of erupting already in this kind of expectation.
Right.
But if you're if in our own church, I think maybe there's a couple people in our ministry that if they jumped, somebody might say, "Ooh, yeah, that's them." But for the most part, nobody jumps on the stage at our church during worship.
Right.
And if somebody did, I think the rest of the church would be like, "Huh, what's going on here?" So it's got to be energetic, but it can't be to the point of awkward or beyond the possibility of others following.
Right.
And it depends on the size of church, the style, the way the lighting is, the natural windows or not. I mean, there's a lot of factors, but I know of several churches that if it's just me and the guitar, if I was in there and decided just to be crazy, it would be weird. I could
Right.
build more energy with words than I can with actions in those places.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we were just talking about that at worship team practice last night. We were singing the song "Praise" by Elevation, and
Uh-huh.
the video that has that of them doing that song is just so energetic. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
amazing, and I mean, just gets me going. And well, when we do it at our church, the crowd doesn't react that way, and so we were having this whole conversation about why is that? Why, So that's very interesting to know the differences. Why,
Yeah, I mean, that is really true. Why doesn't every congregation just do that with that type of song?
right?
But and some of it really is expectation. And when they record those songs, they are, because I went and did a live recording down at the Belonging Company in Nashville, the Belonging Co. Church, and we were there for one of the nights of their taping for their new album, and this was like a year and a half ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But just the fact that those folks know that song is going to be going out to the world is an expectation that allows people to be like, "Oh, yeah, we're going to go wild here."
Right.
And so sometimes it's hard to think about mimicking or emulating that kind of high energy expectation.
Yeah.
But yeah, and praise, we did that all last summer, and we kind of started lopping off the starting point where the echoing let everything.
Yeah, we don't do that either. We just
That
go
made it
right
a lot
into it.
easier for the congregation just to clap along and be a little more energetic without having to try to do everything.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, good point. Well, the 6th and final thing on our list today is know the basics well enough to focus on the extras.
So really, how do we have energy? One of them is to free up brain power to actually make eye contact and engage and smile and lift our hands and do some movement. And all those things are hindered by having to watch the chords and lyrics really, really closely and to have the concentration look on our faces.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've heard this phrase before, but people will go to concerts and sometimes compare the live music with the recordings. And sometimes it's sort of like, yeah, I didn't really love their music until I saw them live. Like the energy of actually seeing somebody do it is what kind of helps make it happen. And of course, when somebody's doing a concert, they're doing the same music and changing the crowd. And we at church worship teams are changing the music with the same crowd. So it takes a little more to go through the hard work of learning a song well enough that we free up space in our mind and our hearts to be energetic for the sake of the church to follow. But yeah, all that plays into when the church is sort of just standing up to sing and they're just looking at you and not doing much. Somehow the worship team has to help it, bring the energy, or at least help equip the church to be the group that helps bring the energy.
Right. So. Absolutely. Yeah, because your congregation is a worshiping church. We want to sacrifice as a worship team to help grow it, teach it, and model dynamic worship in context. So the ultimate goal is Jesus and an open heart towards Jesus. And however, increasing our energy will help make this a reality. So,
yep. And just saying that makes me think that that at times, and it's not like the worship team are the only people that are excited. At times, the congregation is also feeding off that energy, and it becomes like a loop. I mean, like they're getting excited and they're singing and they're doing stuff, and then the worship team, because of that, is more excited and doing more stuff. And so, time of really loud singing from the congregation really does encourage the worship team to really belt it out even more. And so, yeah, all that stuff just kind of works together, and it helps bring energy. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Well, great show, great thoughts today. We're out of time, but we do want to thank our listeners and our partners in ministry and each worship leader who's serving on a regular basis. Just know that we are praying for you here at Worship Leader Toolbox Podcast, and we're trusting that God has you right where you're meant to be. So stay strong and run the race, and you're doing a great job. So to learn more, just visit us at worshipleadertoolbox.com. And would you please just take a moment to rate this podcast and share it with your team? It'll mean a lot to us, and we really appreciate it so much. So thank you so much for joining us today. God bless you, and we will see you next time.
Yep. See you later.